Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. This video is simply designed to provide a brief overview of matters pertaining to due diligence in the real estate and property sector here in Thailand. Basically, those seeking to buy land, or in the case of foreigners, that's a rather difficult thing to do, as you can see from other videos on our site here with respect to real estate and property. But let's say those wishing to lease land or buy a condominium, or perhaps buy what's called an off-plan condominium, which is a condo that's yet to be built but is based on a plan to be built. Title due diligence, title to the land, things like this are rather necessary when undertaking such an endeavor. I would argue it's a necessity. If you're going to be putting money into buying property in Thailand, you probably want to ascertain whether or not the individual who's claiming to be able to sell that property actually owns it. So that's where the due diligence comes in. Basically, the individual, the counterparty who's going to be trying to sell that land needs to go ahead and produce their Shinote title, their title deed, also called a Shinote here in Thailand, which allows for freehold ownership by the other counterparty. And basically, our Thai attorneys here would basically go ahead and find the local land department that would be in charge of that land and ascertain whether or not, in fact, the individual in question does in fact own that land, and thereafter, after having confirmation of that, you'd go ahead and be able to, with a degree of certainty, go ahead to that same land office, presumably, and go ahead and make transfer of property title. The interesting thing about Thailand, just sort of an overview, there was a recent article in the Bangkok Post, and I delved a little deeper into it myself. Thailand does have a very different ownership and conveyancing system from virtually any place else in the world. Local so-called land offices, land departments, basically oversee the transfer and maintenance of property within sort of their jurisdictions, and each land office has its own jurisdiction. It should be noted that these land offices don't really maintain the land records in digital format, so it's not a computerized database particularly, although there are aspects of it that are computerized. But most of the records on these matters are based on paper. Moreover, it's not a public database. An individual, or well, I should say an attorney looking into these matters is basically only doing so after having ascertained the property in question's pedigree from the counterparty. So it's a very different thing than, say, the United States or other countries in the West or the Commonwealth world, where it's almost sort of an open database as far as who owns what and where. It's, the Registrar of Deeds in various jurisdictions in the United States is going to have that information pretty readily on file. There are certain limited circumstances when some of that information is not going to, or certain types of information is not going to be available to the public, but for the most part, such matters are fairly public record. Here in Thailand, that's not really the case. And then on top of that, there's an opacity which is created as a result of the fact that the Thai system doesn't really utilize a computer system for maintaining records on these matters. So for that reason, those really thinking of buying land, and again, land not so much, pursuant to the laws of the Kingdom of Thailand, a foreigner can own land without having the transaction signed off by the Minister of the Interior, which is a virtually non-existent proposition. It doesn't happen very often. It can happen in limited circumstances, very, very rare. There's certain BOI under the Board of Investment. There are certain exceptions for BOI that allow for certain foreign land ownership, but only in the context of like industrial estates and things like that. But with respect to the Thai Condominium Act, yes, it's possible to own Thai property in the form of a condominium here in Thailand. And it should simply be noted that when undertaking, especially with off-plan condominiums, and there's another video on this channel with respect to off-plan condominiums specifically, but when undertaking any purchase of property, it's just a good idea to conduct the due diligence and ascertain whether the counterparty is essentially providing transparency and telling the truth with respect to their ownership interests in the property in question. It's been my experience here in the past that, sometimes the counterparty doesn't even know exactly what their ownership interest is. There are various forms of property title here in Thailand, not just the Shinote, which is sort of the top of the line property title, providing freehold title. There's various sort of subcategories underneath that type that don't provide the same sort of property rights. In many cases, sometimes it's just sort of a right of abode, or a right that can be sort of upgraded into a more long-lasting or transferable type of title. Again, that's going to be very dependent on the circumstances in a given case. But for lack of anything further to say on the subject, the best thing to say on the subject is, yeah, you need to hire a Thai attorney. We have Thai attorneys on staff who can handle these matters, and you need to ascertain what exactly it is that you're bargaining for before finalizing anything or making any irrevocable financial decisions.